Discuss further, we're now joined by the head of the School of Economic and Business Sciences at WITS, Yanni Rousseau. Great to have you with us again, Yanni. Is this a tragedy, or can we recover now that the strikes are over? This is a big reflection of the strikes.
This is indeed a reflection of the strikes. The economy can recover, but this is also a wake-up call. The economy cannot afford strikes for prolonged periods of time. We get into trouble. We see increasing deficits, etc. So this is a wake-up call to our policymakers. It's a wake-up call to labour. It's a wake-up call to business people.
We've seen over and over again this year the growth outlook has been revised downwards. So we're not expecting any great shakes this year. A lot of people concerned because we need job creation and things like that. But this bulletin gives a sense of how the economy is looking overall. If there are no more major strikes, are we at least on the right path?
If there are no more major strikes, the economy will show positive growth for the whole of 2014, albeit at a very low rate, much lower than what we expected in 2013. Now, partly the strikes are to be blamed for this, but policy uncertainty is also to be blamed for this. South Africa is becoming increasingly less attractive for investors. We see, I want to call it quiet disinvestment, like foreign companies building factories in other parts of the world rather than in South Africa. South African companies refraining from investing in South Africa. So it's quiet disinvestment. It's not announced, but we don't see the investment that we need to get the economy back on a growth path as we saw in the 2000s, about 8-9 years ago.
The private sector is certainly not coming to the party, and we do know now that apparently businesses sitting on more than R1 trillion that's not being invested in the economy. Government itself is spending. Is it spending on the right things like infrastructure, things that are meant to crowd in that private sector investment?
Yes, indeed, government does some spending on the right things like infrastructure investment, housing, etc. But then government also has questionable spending. The civil service in South Africa is too large for one. Our civil service salary bill has become unsustainable. And if the growth in the civil service employment and in the civil service salary bill continues, by 2026 the South African government will run out of money. We have research that proves that point.
Really? Sure.
Yes.
This points to something else that's a concern, which our trade minister has raised before, that South Africa just doesn't make enough things that can be exported overseas. So this is about manufacturing as well, isn't it? It's
about manufacturing, but deep down it's an employment problem. Government is making it increasingly more difficult for companies to employ new people. Unemployment is a major challenge facing South Africa, and we do not see relaxation at all of employment legislation. To the contrary, it's becoming increasingly more challenging to employ new people.
And increasing calls for a national minimum wage, which if you look at the substance behind that, there is huge inequality that we need to deal with. What effect do you think it will have?
Well, national minimum wage will again be a factor that makes employment less attractive rather than more attractive. We see increasingly that where companies do invest, they invest in capital intensive rather than labor intensive production. We see it also in farming, where employment over the past 8 or so years declined by 500,000 farm workers. So government gives indications, government makes policy, and then business people respond to that. And if something becomes less attractive, they will find another way of doing what they did before. So what we need is a government that makes investment attractive, that says, here is South Africa, come and do business with us. That must be the short message.
So we've always had this dream, since the RDP was launched, of export-led growth, investment-led growth. What we're seeing now is an influx of imports. Our exports are struggling. So just refine what you're saying. We need policy certainty and very flexible wages. Is that what you believe?
We need policy certainty, flexible wages, but flexible employment conditions. There's only one thing worse for a worker than exploitation, and that's not to be exploited, because that means you do not have a job. So I'm a worker. I'd rather be exploited with a job than not being exploited without a job. So we need policy.
So we don't need to worry about dignified work.
We need people in jobs, and we need to make for an environment that makes employment attractive. We need to say South Africa is open for business, come and do business with us, as you've said, with policy certainty, amongst others.
All right, thank you so much for your analysis tonight. That was Wits academic Jannie Rousseau.